born in Iraq by an accident?
What is happening, folks? Welcome in. Thank you very much, everybody, for calling on Zordy. Jesus, I wasn't expecting that at all. I appreciate you. What is the story? How are we all getting on in this heat? Flamash, what's happening? Hook, Legolas, McKins, Rukia, what's the story? BK Ultimate, BK Ultimate was not a fan of me at work the other day. I was annoying as happiness. Look at that face, there he is. Yep, a wee bald hairy face. How have we all been getting on? Boiling in the heat. It is quite bad. I have a fan on me and I have a cold drink here just in case because I've been fucking roasting. But yeah, I took a wee bit of a break from Twitch. Just kind of really burnt out there. Oh! Big Ultimate, thank you very much for the prime sub. Jesus, all the checking and everything's happening all at once. There's just all the noises. How was the break? It was alright. It was alright. Still don't know how well I am, because I was very anxious in starting this tonight as well, but you know what? Ash, what's happening? Isn't Pragmata the dad game or something? It is. You're a robot. You're like a space dad with a wee robot, wee girl. So far, it's been wonderful. It's been a great game. We've taken a couple of weeks off just to kind of chill and kind of departmentalize. But back at it now. Dad Simulator. That's what it is. It's a walking dad. No, well, we did that when we played Death Stranding. Just take it at your own pace. Aye, well, that's what it is. I was chatting to a very good friend of mine and they gave some wonderful advice where they were just like, my main issue was I wasn't feeling the usual persona that, you know, we put on when you go on the stream. And what I mean by that is normally when you stream it yourself, but dialed up to about 11. And it was a couple of times I was about to stream and I just wasn't feeling it. And they just turned around and said, listen, stop with the masks and the persona. Just, if you're not, you know, go on as you're feeling. Just, you can be down, you can be happy. So it might be a bit more chill and a bit more relaxed tonight just because just kind of getting back at it. But thank you, folks. But yeah, the heat's fierce. I didn't see much of that solar eclipse last night, though. More ins? More ins? More puns? Probably less puns. Probably less puns. I know you don't like my puns, so I'm just gonna hold them down for you there, be careful. But let me know about the audio levels and stuff, because there has been a few OBS and StreamerBot updates since then, so I think it's better to be yourself. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's probably something maybe I should have done from day one. For anybody that doesn't know, Hook's representation on stream is himself. That's what he's like in real life. He doesn't even have to put on a persona. I think it makes it very poor when you start some things are mine. Yeah, it does. It does needs a complete recharge as well, and you can get burnt out streaming too much and worrying about it, and then you start looking at analytics, and after a while you're kind of like, well, this isn't why I got into it. I got into it for a bit of crack and just to play. I am that thick. You're not that thick. You are a lovely man, so don't tell him. Legolas, you're his sister. I've already told him. It's some of these just, yeah. I normally am. It's just myself kind of dialed up, but so you have to kind of get yourself up and keep the energy levels up. But think about what's the point? Is it even worth it? It'd be man great to see you back. Thank you, sir. Thank you. And then I was sitting tonight and I was debating this, and I was going to go live last night, but I just ended up too busy with stuff. So, mate, welcome in. Thank you for checking on the ledger. Samurai. I should actually make that a bit bigger because it's possible. I've changed a few things on stream and made everything a bit. I don't know what this is. I don't know what I'm doing with my hands. I made everything a bit smaller so it doesn't like pop up and cover my face. Not that it's a face that anybody wants to see, but it means it's not as much covered and it's to the side. It doesn't cover the game. I was so glad to see you, Legolas. Thank you very much. When are you coming back? Because I know you've been chatting there about it as well. I'll be excited to see that whenever you come back too. But yeah, thank you for the kind words, folks, as well. I appreciate it. I'm gonna flip over to the game now and start playing. So last time we were playing, we got up to the point where we went to rescue 8, and for whatever reason we had to leave her and we rushed back out again. So we're moving on to the next section. Actually, my PC fixing audio here, but everything else seems set up. Oh, happy days.
Umar, you sure you want to do that right now?
May, thank you very much. Thank you for the bots. Thank you for the bots. I really appreciate it. Might do a test night next week. Oh, happy days. You can do it as well and just do a recording just to see how it all sounds too. But you all know each other anyway. Anybody that's not following Buddy May, please do so. She was streaming earlier on today. Really, really, really class streamer. Really fun stream to be in. Very high energy, and also a world-class DBD coach. So go on to learn Dead by Daylight. Not a problem. Thank you very much for coming on. That's a good shout. That's what I always do. And it was Hook gave me that advice. He said, go for the recording first, and that way you can test how much your encoder is going to be stressed and everything, and then you can see how it sounds. Check your audio levels. Right. Paid him to say the thing. He just paid me bits there now. It was obvious, like the Federal Commission's going to be on you because he didn't even try and hide the transaction. But yeah, I've been taking a bit of a break just because it just wasn't feeling right in my head. And like I said, it was the advice I got just to go on and don't care about the mask or the persona, because what's the point? Because it's just wasted energy then at that point. Glad I check in this YouTube channel called Zero Cash. Don't check them. They're a bunch of jokers, anyways. One of them's bald as fuck. But yeah, and it was always the kind of build up and the anxiety. Definitely is wasting energy and time. Mate, you're 100% right. And yeah, and I do enjoy the streaming, and just going to do this. Well, I'm not going to be this fucking sad and somber from now on, but I'm gonna just go on depending on how I'm feeling. So some days I'll be hyper and mad maybe, and other days maybe not so much. So I'm gonna have to plug that thing into it now. You have been starting to do new videos for it, haven't you? Just be you and go with the flow. Yeah, I think you're right in what you're saying. So I'm going to do that. And this is a fairly chill game. Well, it's very actiony based, but it's quite a chill game. Yeah, some drafts I need to get back to them. Nice one. I need to start doing the same. I've seen every single video is flooded now with that AI generation tab that came on with Twitch, and I think that it's not even the actual AI generation I think that people are annoyed about. It's the fact that they automatically opted you in without giving you a choice, and you have to go find it yourself to opt back out again. And then I was watching a video on, they were interviewing the guy who implemented it, and he didn't have a clue what was happening. Like, he was just like, they were all, oh, so before we press the button, have you already scrubbed our VODs for information for the generation? He's like, yeah, maybe, I don't know. And I'm like, I don't even know what they're going to use it for, but it's Amazon, so I'm assuming it's going to be marketing directing. It's going to be maybe targeted ads, looking through your chat to find out what people are talking about. You know, it's an odd one. I see you have my hairstyle. I left my head and my beard. Extreme Attitude. Yeah, I did. I stole your haircut. What's happening? Never good. Yeah, it's worrisome the fact that they tried to sneak it in without actually giving people the option. Upside down here, that's exactly what it does. The camera's just flipped upside down. I actually have a full head of hair and a bald chin, and that's the way I've gone about it. But yeah, I see everybody's flooding it with those videos at the moment, so I'm not going to maybe do one of those for zero cash. Probably just go back to tutorials and stuff. Maybe more things to do with widgets. One thing I'm going to do with my channel is there's a that's the thing. Yeah, is everywhere now. It's bound to make way to. Yeah, it already has. There's already things it does. Like there's an auto clipper and everything that some people are trialing out. There's a command that you can put on if you vocally say it in chat, it will make a clip as well. So it's already stuff in there. But give people the choice. Don't make it automatic. Cleo, what is the matter with you? What's wrong with you? Eh? What's wrong? Because she hears me talking in the microphone, she thinks it's time to give her a treat.
Tell me what you want.
Hey, straight fucking in there.
Oh, excuse me?
Cleo, may I got you a wee treat?
No.
And it's not
What do
even
you say?
dentist sticks this time. It's bacon. Bacon
No.
Twizzlers.
No.
You guys say
I'm not
thank
gonna
you?
give you a treat if you call me that. What do you say?
Please, bitch,
She was
please.
She was asking why you got rid of the hatchet redeem. She did. I think it's just disabled. I think it's still there. I'll pop it back on. I was not twerking. I wasn't twerking. I was tweaking. I was tweaking stuff on Twitch and turning everything on and off. Where is it? No, it says enable. It should be on. There we go, Konami. Why isn't that come up? No, I'll turn it off and turn it back on again. That's the only way to do things. The only way. Leo, I still have to give you a treat. I'm sitting there, I have the treat here, and I'm just sitting petting you. I know, I'm a bad daddy. I'll pop your camera on first while I do this. Why was it? Turn it off and turn it on again. That should fix it. Oh, it's too dark. Oh, for fuck's sake, Leo. You can kind of see the mound of dog. There she is. She's jumping away. I'm running round the house with my wee hatchet on me. Wee hatchet on me. Wee hatchet on me. Actually done now, pup. Running round the house. Because I said her name. You know what animated redeems or do your own way on Photoshop and bring it to OBS? That'll be good. Yeah, we did do one on ProFinder, so like a lot of the scene transitions and stuff, you would see like an animated thing come up and you could do it with your own logo, and that was done on ProFinder. And there's free tiers and everything as well. We did the Sonic one as well. Now, the only thing with the Sonic one's quite a big alert, so it covers the whole screen whenever it does happen. The one I've done now with the PlayStation's a lot smaller. So I might do something more like that, something a bit more simple, and it means that people can customize it their own way then. Yeah, but I was going to start doing that and then stop, by the way, the suspense. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Did you change your shelf behind it? Yes, I did change my shelf. So I went up the IKEA the other day. Now, I'll tell you the story. Look, I feel like I can just chat for ages. I'll tell you the story. I went up and was helping my sister move stuff up to her new flat. Went to IKEA and got myself some pegging. And I see, it's a good job. It's a good job. So I've put all my Final Fantasy games up there and my Transformers vinyl. So Final Fantasy 1 to 15. I still need 16 and I need 14 and they're on their way. And then I had a moment of insane disappointment where I went to Chick-fil-A on the way back, and apparently they don't open on Sundays because the owner's religious, and I had immense disappointment and just bought myself some crisps, and it was sad. My brain can't deal with things like that. Sometimes we refer to it as a touch of autism. Yeah, I think we all have it. It's a shot. You've been doing what? I got, the pagan stuff from IKEA, so it's like a pegboard, and you stick the wee brackets on, and then you can put games or whatever on it. The vinyl one's pretty cool because it's 2 wee straps that come down, and they just hold the vinyl record up, which is quite nice. Yeah, it ain't called pagan, dude. It's pegboards. Well, what I call it? Same thing. Tomato. Same thing. I don't know. Pegboard then. You happy? Pegboard. I'm sorry that I'm not cool and like you and call me pagan, what the young kids call them these days. Right, gonna go over the game now though. You don't know what pagan means? Like clothes pegs or what? You knew what he meant, so leave him alone. Aye, he knew what it meant. Like, hang on. Like, that's a thing. Like, that's not that pegboard's a thing. Like, I didn't just buy like a weird grate or something and start sticking stuff on it. Jamie, what's happening? How's the lad? Here we are, all the lads. Wait a minute. Where's your new photo? I don't know. In the mood I was feeling, the new photo seemed a bit full of myself, so I just went back to the old one. No, go over the game now. Don't know, my mind's all over the place at the moment, so I keep chopping and changing stuff. I know, you calm your jets. Wind them up, you pipe down. Look, you're a wild man, you're giving me a lot of grief. I said nice things about you earlier as well. I fucking dare you. I demand it back, you jerk. Well, he is head mod, he can get people. He can get people at banhammer. Don't know, I don't know. I liked it, and then I was like, look, for anybody that doesn't know, this is Diana. This is the chat that we have. Moji!
That's a pretty good shot, kid. Now how about aiming at the enemy?
Irish guy plays. What's happening? Moji Raid. My god, how did your stream go earlier on? I never even got a chance to call in. Really dig this version of you. Appreciate it, mate. Thank you so much. Hold on, we're gonna go back there, just chatting screen. We just got into the game there. We'd taken a wee break from streaming there for a few weeks, and this is us back now at the moment. I hope you're well. Same to you, Irish guy. Thank you very much for coming on. Oh, thank you very much for the follow. Elusive Con Man. I'm not worried at all. It's all fine. But how was Final Fantasy? I see you're playing Final Fantasy 14 quite a bit. Now, of the physical Final Fantasies I've been trying to collect, 14 is on its way in the post, so I haven't got that one yet. But how did the stream go? Anybody doesn't know Moji-san, she is our friend who lives over in Japan and plays a lot of RPGs and is a wonderful streamer and good crack. She gives me a lot of grief though. She gives the banter's fierce. Keep an eye on that comment, chap. Oh, I will. It's 4 a.m, so bedtime for me. Thank you very much again for the raid. I really, really appreciate it. Anybody that reads in me, hold on, I don't even know if this is going to work because I haven't looked at it since I've come back. Another Belfastian? Oh, definitely not. There we go, Moji-san. I haven't streamed at all in August, so Moji, you're my first and only raid. But there you are in the Hall of Fame. You're technically the leader. No, I'm from Derry. I'm from the other side. Unfortunately, I'm not as well pronounced as Big Boss Man and Pogs. But yeah, anybody that's not following Moji, please check her out. Give her a wee follow. But I hope your stream went well. I absolutely love 14. 14 is one of the few games that physically made me cry. Just the story got the initial game is good, but the expansions are phenomenal. Like Love Seal, thank you very much, Moji. You go get some rest. No one wants to sound like Pogs. I don't know. There's times I want to sound like Pogs. And the Big Boss that TikTok once, it was a while back, and it was talking about, they were talking about the team or the country Turkey, And Pogs piped up, turkey, is that the chicken you have at Christmas? And I cried laughing for about 40 minutes. It was so good. Gives me PTSD from school. Well, we just had the whole chat crying at a certain point. Oh, no spoilers, but whereabouts in the game are you? I would pump up my health a wee bit. I have to try and remember how to play this game now. So this is our wee girl Diana. She's a wee robot girl, and I went back offline and did a lot of the side stuff. Well, not a lot of the some of the side stuff, and we got this whole area completed. So it becomes like a wee den, and I'm assuming this is going to be like a playpen, and this is going to be like a little park. So I'm going to do that in my off time. Menophilia. Oh. Oh, gee, I understand where you're at. Yeah. Just one patch blue bloodstorm. Right, okay. There's no harm in Paul, looks like. So we're going to the Lunum Mines, right? Okay. That would be an ecumenical matter. It would be an ecumenical matter. Yes, no. Menophilia is a great character. I think from the end of Paris, thank you very much for the resub. 18 months as well. That's so generous. Thank you so much, sir. You can't take a break, but you can take a break, but you can't escape my subscription. I appreciate the bots. I appreciate the bots and the subs and stuff, but even just folks just calling on and chatting, that's really all I want. I appreciate you. These are very good to me. Happy Irishman? Is that like Irish guy plays Evil Clone? It is. It's Irish guy plays, but happier. And
7 minutes.
Absolutely
7 minutes is
loves
all I can spare
Monster
to
Hunter.
play with you.
Welcome back, mad at them prags. Moji, I'm gonna allow that. Fucking hell. Just about a lot of Irishmen, but it is. We're breeders, that's the problem with the Irish. But Tomahawk, welcome on. How are you getting on? I'm actually going to do this separately because you don't chat under the one you stream under. Oh, why did that come up like that? Oh, that was weird. I just did it here. Sorry if I'm hitting this microphone. There was an update, the Stream Deck, and some of the apps aren't working on it now. Happy Irishman actually likes Star Citizen. So does Irish Guy Plays.
This is gonna take some getting used to.
Oh, fuck, look at that.
Everything feels kind of
Enjoy, I think.
floaty.
Yeah. Each their own. Fair play, fair play. Why were you slagging off my pegboard, though? Don't understand.
So that's where Edis is. It's pretty far off. Wish we had a shuttle or
Beepity
something.
beeped. I've got a wee bit addicted. They've hunted and buying retro video games on it. Let's go. Oh shit, look at this. Right. Oh, listen to the audio and everything on it. Let's go. Oh, don't climb up on the big rock. His name's Hugh as well, isn't it? I've forgotten that. Hang tight shoutouts on a cooldown for 5 minutes. Why the fuck is it saying that for?
The tower's
I will
right
not
there.
hang tight. Fuck you.
Why we gotta
Should be
take the
90
long way
seconds.
around? Nothing
Right.
new, but things sure feel different when the gravity shifts.
How's it different?
Well, my thrusters push us farther, but they're harder to control.
Seems like an upgrade to me.
Yep, Dana, you're right. You're chatting shite. But yeah, if you're in the UK or Europe at the moment, it's really it's unusually hot.
Use those platforms to get across.
Ireland isn't getting it too bad, but I know that there's some places in the UK that they're getting quite bad red weather warnings. So I'm hoping everybody stays hydrated and stays safe. Ooh, you know. There we go. There we got that for me. Upgrade components, nicely job. Right, across we go. Belfast's getting pretty heated right now. Yeah, it's warm over here too. I don't want the charge piercer.
Charge that unit up.
Ooh, nice one. Monster counts as hydration. It does. Yes, it does. There's water in it. I'm on another fast at the moment. I did a 48-hour one earlier on the week, and then had an eating day yesterday. And I think I found my new one now, am I? Should be about 30 hours-ish. 25 hours. 30 hours and 5 hours out. Not both this weather. I'm not either. We don't have air conditioning, so kind of a little bit.
No idea.
No idea what to do with the
Alarm
legs.
won't
I did
cut
a
it.
fast 3 days
Go
ago.
for another
Do,
one.
are you a fan of the intermittent? I enjoy the simplicity of it because I'm too fucking fat and lazy to start going to the gym. So the intermittent fasting's a handy way for me to kind of just get rid of calories. Works better than calorie counting. I do, but it's every to each their own. Like everybody should do whatever works for them. I find it helps me lose weight.
Stop skittering around.
Oh, I forgot all my buttons. Look at this wee fucker. Right, okay.
Now it's my turn.
But yeah, actually there's an app as well that I signed up to, Upkeep, where it targets you every day to hit a step goal. Now I haven't been, it's not been anything mental. It's been about 5,000. I think it's gone up to 6,000 steps a day, and I've been doing it consistently now. Just it's good for me. It's good for the dog. We both get out. But doing that along with the fasting to try and hopefully get myself a little bit healthier. And I do feel it. I do feel it. Although you get days where you just feel very, very tired and drained, because, and I'm assuming it's because of it. But that's what it is. Should probably change some weapons here. Oh, right, okay. Akira, welcome on. Good to see you too, buddy. My wee shoutout thing isn't working, so I can't even do that automatically. Fasting, I feel, helps a lot. I feel more energy and helps me detox and fresh. There is a thing with the fasting. Once you had about maybe the 35 hour marks, was just different for everybody. You go into a mode called apophagy, where you start to break down old cells and start to create new ones. And apparently it's quite good for your skin and stuff. I wouldn't know, I'm just old as fuck, like, but
Let's do this.
oh, there we go. We did quite well that one. Right, okay. I do not feel as nimble as I did the last time I played this. Not as nimbly-bimbly. Be kind, sir. I think the Hook dude should do your shoutouts for you. He really should. Being head mod, he does like to flex that hammer. What's he doing? To be fair, I can't really say anything. I haven't been as present in other people's streams as I really should have, and I feel really bad about it. Just wanted to say, I can't hang my plays. Kira, that is not a problem. I do the same thing all the time with games where if I'm going to play it, I kind of call on, maybe drop a wee lurk or something, but yeah, that's more than fine. Thank you. Even just come and say hello, Kira. Anybody's on phone who's a big Resident Evil fan. He plays a lot on retro hardware and stuff. Does really good, cool challenges. Oh, controller has just shut itself. This keeps happening. And I don't think it's a battery thing. I think it's a connection thing. Shit! Fucker, Flemish. Jesus Christ. There we go. Let's come back now. Fucking hell. Had to be done. Yeah, you're right. It's there for a reason. Had to be done. But yeah, I was taking a lot of time to myself, kind of playing various games. Playing a lot of DVD and stuff as well, which I've actually got quite a bit on there and really enjoying. No good at it. I'm still quite shite, but I'm enjoying it. Lady, so welcome on. Ban this man. I would, but he's actually not that bad. He's a wild man for the old spoilers, like, but he's a good egg altogether. Where was I going? That way? Hmm. Maybe not. Maybe we tried one of these tunnels. Oh, there's a lot. Alright, I'm going to head off and rest. Elizabeth Coleman, thank you very much for coming on and saying hello. I appreciate you. And you go have a good rest of your night. And hopefully you can get a wee fan and it's not too... No, that's not the button I'm pressing. I'm pressing X. What the... Oh, I have to wait until it gets there. Oh, you bastard, you've added a new level of complexity for me. Hopefully you can stay cool. Stay hydrated. Have a good night. Okay, so that's what I was doing wrong. Ah, grab. Grab. Yeah, so we've been playing a load of different games offline. Like some Street Fighter. Oh, Split Fiction has now become one of my favourite games of all time. If any of you haven't played it, get a buddy and play it. The thing is, only one of you have to purchase it, and then you can send the friend pass to anyone else on another platform. Very, very good.
Warning. Unauthorized presence detected in the mining zone. Luna Digger. Halt mining protocol.
Luna Digger.
Remove these intruders.
What the? Look at the size of that.
Okie dokie. That happened.
That's the Luna Digger, huh?
That's it, you. That's Luna Digger. Red Blaster. Okie dokie. Oh, is it there? Into some bullshit.
Don't step on the sand.
Don't step on the sand? How are we supposed to get across?
I don't think it normally attacks humans.
In response to your query regarding the excavation bot, first, the biometric ID system program to prioritize avoidance of living beings. Additionally, its reinforced exterior not only withstands operational impact, but also shields you from unintended electronic interference, so it can't hack it either. Right, okay.
Thought these things were built to steer clear of people.
Jesus, your man must have lost some weight.
But that system's now what's tracking us.
Oh, what's it? Sticky bombs? I hate the sticky bombs in this. I don't know what to do with them.
That too.
I think I have to plant them and then hack them, but I'm too dumb. Yay. Oh, fuck.
Sorry, we're going straight.
Right, Joey,
in
welcome on.
through
What's
the
happening?
quad
How you
and into
doing?
the gymnasium. Come on, everybody!
You're kind of like me. You've taken a wee break from the streaming for about, haven't you, sir? You have to carry and protect the little girl the whole way through. She is the one doing the hacking, so see when I go like that, they start hacking somebody.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. She does the hacking. To be fair, I don't think we could actually get through this game without her. She's pretty much the main character. I'm the side character at this point. She is the greatest NPC ever in a game, and I will kill people to protect this child.
And watch those.
Here it comes. Maybe I should change that so it's above the camera. creepy. Hold on a second. The alerts above the camera. That way it doesn't kind of cut it off, and it cuts me off, and you know that's not a bad thing, really, is it? You could get her. She's a robot. She doesn't need you. She stands on the wee thing on my back. She's fine. She's grand. I got her toys and stuff. Got her toys and stuff. She's fine. I shared. And this hacking gauge is full, right? Okay. My hacking gauge, folks. My hacking gauge is full. What?
Missile spotted.
Oh fuck! Right. Okay.
Right back at ya.
Right back at you, son of a bitch. So see all this hacking that she does? It's to break into the systems and allow me to kind of hit their weaknesses. Fuck's sake, I was supposed to play the Konami one in the first place instead. It's been a while. No, don't worry about it. It's been a while. It's a good one too. And it has been a while since we played that one.
I can't wait to get back to the shelter.
Yeah, so I've been playing some games with really cool buddies, and the conversation came up of like your offline version versus your stream version, and I'm still going to have streams where I'm very, very well, not manic. I don't think I was ever manic. I've always been a bit, well, see myself as being a bit more chill, but I'm probably going to be more like I am when I play offline now. Where this is a lot of energy to put on the performance, I think. I don't think it's needed.
We'll just have to make our way through the facility.
Guess we're taking the long way around.
What is this? Impact barrier. Defense unit that deploys a barrier that blocks some enemies. Oh, right, okay. So it's just an item. Someone said I made decoy, right, okay. Let's see. Okie dokie. Oh, there's a wee thing over here. So I'm going to stream tonight, see how it goes. Maybe stream back. Maybe come back on Saturday as well. But I'm just going to take it day by day and see how I'm feeling with it.
Okay.
Ooh, look at the left. Okay, excellent, okay. No, it was a good one. You let her away with. Jesus. Fine. Right, I have to make it over here then. Oh, nope. Let me in. There we go. Where do I go from here? Right, okay. Up here. Nice job. And I get what is happening? Howdy handsome. You looking in the mirror again? Is that what's happening? Have you seen your reflection and that's why you're saying those words? I don't know why I felt the need to get that wee butt, but I just thought. Ah, looking at you. Ah! Blind, you've bad eyesight. I get it. But thank you very much for coming in. And I get what is happening? How have the streams been going for yourself? Hope you're well. I'm doing okay.
There's a mine here.
Maybe we can use it to trip up some bots.
Yeah. Let's use it on the Luna Digger.
Can I crack them over here?
Move,
It did something, at least. Ah, sure that's himself away there. No, well, enjoying games when the weather isn't trying. Yeah, that's the other thing as well. When the weather is this bad, it's difficult to actually play because your console or PC is actually going to make the problem worse. Fuck. We'll get in here because I've been attacked as well. I'd seen you were playing that Moss game last, and it looked really, really cool. Really like the look of it. Looked like a really cute game.
Stop skittering around.
Ah, stop it. Right, okay. Ah, shit, that wasn't into that. It's cozy, but it actually makes you do a lot. Oh, very good. Actually, that sounds really cool. So kind of, but like Ori and the Blind Forest and such. The art style's next level. It did seem that way. Look, if you're there, would you be able to give an egg a wee shout out as well, please? And just anyone else I might have missed, because
It was
I'm not very good at this.
perfect. Everything, down to
What
the
was
last
perfect?
minute details.
You know what? We have a Hugh in this game, but we don't have a Hugh in real life. Sorry. Sorry, NA. Just mess with the dreams, work away. That's what they're there for. Annabeth does it. No, May loves it when people go on their stream and mess about with her redeems. Shoutouts are on cooldown for 12 minutes. What do you mean? Why is this started coming up? My bot is fucking acting whack. It's still getting a shoutout, but yeah, they are. Don't get excited. Pinche me. Pinche me. I know Spanish. Although, I did make a bit of a faux pas the other day where I said to someone, I called them a fucking tray instead of a fucking idiot, and it was quite funny. They laughed. Oh my god, off with his head. Sweating. And I don't know whether it's because May's threatening to murder me or what. Right, where are we? We're in space. We're on the moon. That wizard came from the moon. Name that game. Fine and dandy, just like candy. You're doing well. That sounds like a song.
Hold on. Does this mean
Look at you,
someone's
something.
controlling Edis?
He never told us that.
Well, if that's true, this may not end at Edis.
Well, he might have been a tray. God, yeah, perfect. Perfect. And yeah, you get me so well, don't you? But I'm going to steal that one, just so you know that I will repeat it and claim it's my own. You no longer hold intellectual rights to your own jokes. Where me, I just don't hold any sort of intellectual rights. Feel free, gotta shoot jokes. That's true. That's true. Photon laser. Kinda like the homie missiles. The homie missiles. Yo, what up, homie? Ah, for fuck's sake. Right, okay. I don't like this new level of complexity that getting grilled shrimp and chicken with mashed potatoes and veggie for dinner is red sauce sorry, not red sauce, is ketchup going on the mashed potatoes. That sounds really nice though. Kinda getting a bit hungry anyway. But it will be tomorrow before I'm eating again. Ketchup and mashed potatoes? Yep, there's been a discussion. Ketchup. That's what the big tomato said to the small tomato who's fallen behind. Ketchup. Sweet Jesus. Wouldn't be mine, I'd be a brown sauce kind of man. I love a fry up with a bit of brown sauce. Oh fuck, I'm talking about food now. Shit.
Let's hurry back and get that to
Holy.
Calvin.
Right. Is this where I was supposed to go? Got a case of disposed is. Or maybe I go that way. That's where I go. Well, for ketchup on chips, but mashed potatoes, that's a new one. You're gonna have to explain yourself. What are you on about? The fuck are you on about? Oh my fucking god.
Hugh, the entrance to the building is over there.
Is that a warehouse? Let's go find a way inside.
Let me know about audio levels and stuff as well. If I got a wee bit fucked up. What's the difference? It's a potato, whether it's wedges, chips, or mashed. Oh, no, 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 no. As an Irishman, there's a subtlety and there's certain nuances to the potato. Potato must be treated with respect. One should be very courteous towards all their spud neighbors.
It's taking aim. Its sensors can track us, even from a distance.
Jesus, here you, sir.
I got him.
You know what my favourite potato is? Either a nice crispy roast potato or a dauphinoise. And I know a dauphinoise is a fancy spud, but I do like it. Well, eventually the chips become mush once you the teeth grind them. Ah, red sauce I like, but I would never choose it over others. For me, it's a texture thing, right? Okay. See, chips are crispy on the outside, fluffy on the inside, but the ketchup on mash, it's fluffy with no crispy in the sauce to connect with. You're an intellectual man when it comes to potatoes, even more so than me. Literally, mashed potatoes. But would you put red sauce on your crisps or your potato chips, so to speak? Because they're just potatoes. Oh, right, okay. That's not going well. I'm just going to use my ability when I get up here. Boil called spuds. The deep fat fryer roasties? What? Oh, I have to pause for this. What? Oil called spuds in the deep fat fryer. Called spuds as roasties? Yeah, they're roasties. My profile pic is upset. That's true. You got one on that one? Yep. Would you put? Although we have had ketchup flavored. Go on, Diane. We have had ketchup flavored potato chips before. I think Walker's brought them out, didn't they? I never tasted them though. I don't know what they're like. Well, they're not roasted; they're just fried. Well, yeah, but they're like roasties. They're crispy on the outside, soft in the middle. Armadillos. Yeah, different, but I don't put red sauce on my crisps. Look at you calling it red sauce now. You've been Irish-sized. I don't need anything over there, do I? No. Over here is the way I'm going. Someone mentioned that in chat earlier. Right, okay. Híjole. For anyone that doesn't know, an e-hole is an emergence hole where the locusts first came out. They attacked the humans in Gears of War. Thank you again, folks, for coming on.
Okay,
I didn't really know what to expect from tonight, but I appreciate you.
let's check it out.
Let's check it out. Oh, it's a red gate. Right, okay. Oh, this is a tease. It's a fucking tease. Can I get on?
Sensing some REM data.
Yeah.
Another one?
How the fuck do I get in though, Dan?
Wait to see what it is.
It must be a way in there. I don't want to do that. They're pretty challenging. I've done one of them before. It was quite good, but it was a pleasure to see you. No worries.
What the fuck is going on here?
What the fuck is going on here? Our Leo DiCaprio, hey? A man who never dates anywhere near his age. His age. Oh, that one. Oh, Shutter Island's a great film. Great film. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Ooh, right. Okay, so this is a bit of a puzzle. No, Leo, no, it's fucking not yet. Tube. Why am I giving myself?
It's been a while.
Has been a while. No. Ah, I went back in the hole. Oh, right, okay. Why did I get that one then? Can I get it from this side? Yes. That's how I get the thing right, okay. A bug net? Oh, so that must be with the sort of gardeny one. Food is here. Go and enjoy your food, May. Happy days. Get them carbs. We love the carbs because it's how we keep the curves. All the food. I know.
He bought something and they'll shut down. If only we had a unit.
Kind of outraging. I'm only 25 hours in, but You know what, fuck it. It is what it is. That was my fault. Oh, I could have actually got my heals back up. Just wasn't paying attention. Right, you know what, you're going down first, mister. Oh, right, okay. Take that. There's no time limit, just do it at your own pace. Oh no, I mean for me fast. There is a time limit. And it's for when I could eat the food again. I don't know if I'm shooting this guy in the right place. Why can't... Stick you there. That's you in the corner. That's you in the spotlight, losing your religion. This is baby, and I have put him in the corner. I can take the time, so to speak. Very short window to get him. I don't like that now. He is probably going to do that thing again where I get to do like the stun attack. I think that's what the red bar at the bottom is. I've got through all my ammo. Oh, he's almost dead anyway, it doesn't matter. Fuck, that was a bit of a fight. He's got our Amber to defeat for a while, yep. So good, the twist the first time was mad. What are we talking about? Isn't Joe could watch it in one sitting. Oh, what are we talking about? Shutter Island. Alright, okay. Yeah, yeah. It's one of them ones it's good to watch a second time knowing the twist. What is this? What is this? Oh, so I have to use these to get out. Right, okay.
Hello, mining site. Look at all these containers. I wonder if they're all filled with limb.
The material inside seems fresh. Nothing refined like lunar filament.
Figures. More moon dirt.
More moon dirt.
Back to the shelter.
You're a man of culture, he. Man of culture. I just use this to get out. Or is there going to be something that I need to get out of here? Get out of here.
Sorry, we're going streaking
Chance, welcome.
through
I
the
don't know what's
quad.
happening. 5-stream streak as well. Thank you
Come
very
on,
much.
everybody!
Appreciate you. Thought there might have been something in there. Maybe there is. I don't know. I don't do things. I'll just click on the thing. I don't like that. It's not targeted on it, right? No, there's nothing up there. Oh, there might have been. Oh, wait, what is that? Something? That way back. But open anyway. But thank you very much for coming on. Ads on the way. Yeah, just let that run. Although, would you give you a wee shout out as well? Your moon dirt is no peat. Peat's top tier dirt. It is. It is. Use peat for heat. I've started to suspect that my neighbour, though, is taking soil from his garden and putting it in the mine. I have no evidence yet, but the plot thickens. We're going with Shards Piercer. Hey, I know. It's an old one, but it's a classic. Just like me. Right. What am I doing here now? What am I doing here? What am I doing? What are you on about? Right, no, not in there. Let me get up that pile. Can I just walk through? Oh, I could just walk through. I thought it was hidden. Fuck. Better start digging on that. Oh, I gotta sort his plans. I can't. I was going to, but I completely lost the plot then. Ah, right. Okay, I'm gonna butt a baller because I've never bothered following up my health again. Stop skittering around, sir. Fuck. Maybe get rid of this guy first. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Careful, they're hot. I don't know why he reverts to the handgun whenever I clearly have the assault rifle version. I feel like it's shenanigans. Oh, I don't have the health for whatever the fuck this is. Oh no. Oh shit. Oh, I'm dead. I'm dead. It's just handy. Nice things, weapon. Gee, what happened? What happened? You started. Make it a bit of health though. It's not in a good way. We give her a present. Oh, we have another one to give her too. Campfire as well to give. See, this is the fucking game here. All the other stuff's just side stuff.
Wait, just a few seconds.
Butcher. Trigger the butcher.
Now look.
Is this a princess?
No, it's me wearing pretty clothes. I want to wear something like this one day. And I wanted to give this to you so you'd remember.
I'll check.
I know. So good.
There's something in stock.
We will murder people for this child.
That was... What's the point of a holographic fire anyway?
So you don't get burnt. Because you fucking fall off things weird. What is new? Abilities, critical shot, yes. That's a lot off Master Chief. The world would burn if it did. Yeah, exactly. Later critical shot, that'll be a good one. Oh, thank you again for doing the show for Nike. I don't know what the cooldown is about. That's a new thing which had never popped up before. But it does do the shoutout, so it's that does fucking weird. Oh, we can do some upgrades. I am going to bump up my HP a wee bit because I think that's where I'm taking a lot of damage. Up a bit. There's some shoutouts. Got a share, 2 warm for the seat. Get a cool German. I got one earlier on as well, and it was so good. Just kind of refreshes you a bit, doesn't it? Or maybe it's a chatbot and streamer bot giving that reply. Yeah, I think it might be, but I don't know why. There was an update to streamer bot, so I'm going to have to look and find out what it did. It cannot be printed and shelter have been lost. Right, okay. No. warehouse entrance. Right, okay, we're going back in here with full health, which is good. I need to go share in this. I know. It's the heat is fierce at the moment. But at the same time, I don't know if we should be complaining about it because we hardly ever get it.
That defender bot keeps getting in the way.
It does.
The others. I can't hack it, but if you shoot the control nodes in the middle of its shield, they'll break.
Exactly, Dan. It's no joke.
I can do that.
Got it. Use it. Keep that up, then burn him down.
Hoping this I'm a wee bit more powerful now. Oh, he's attacking him for me. Nice one. Ah. This is actually already going a little bit better. Right, okay, okay. I know I probably should be taking the time to go for a longer hack, but yeah. I don't know, I'm just all about the fans these days. I know whenever we had the last bad... Did I drop this on him? No. I know when we had the last bad kind of heat wave, everyone was talking about getting AC machines installed, but, you know... It's a... What's the purple one? It's a big expense for the few weeks we might have a bit of heat. It's different if you lived out in like the United States or something where it's just really fucking hot. I'm going to go back and actually get this chest first because I didn't realize how easy that one was. I just didn't go back for it. Oh no, I've bamboozled myself. Oh no, fuck that shit then. No, where you go, kid. Fuck. That one gets me. Would you go up the house, sir? Well, Mush, what is the crack with you? I seen you were playing Silent Hill 2 again the other day. How are you getting on with that? It's PRAGMATA. It's going really, really well. Love this game. Very, very good.
To ensure safety,
Can we skip this? Because I've already done this wee bit. Well, I've done it. I died here.
authorized personnel only. Bots, please remove our uninvited guests.
Not gonna last the endings. Maybe another stream or two would be good. Oh, very nice. Lamosh is a big fan of Silent Hill 2, the remake. And to be fair, I played that before playing this, and it was a wonderful game. But, what words were I just about to say? There's multiple endings, so he is going through now and cleaning up the rest of them, which is quite cool to watch. Oh, sir. Stranger danger. What you doing? What you doing? What you doing that for? What? Oh, well, it sounds like something else is going to show up. Actually, something's going to pop out of there, out of them too, isn't it? Oh no, this guy! I forgot about this guy.
Defender, please expedite the process.
Look out for No, it's jamming the shield. Look out.
There we go. Didn't even know he was there until I seen him there a wee second ago. Well, sure, it's himself. Is that good? Oh, he's got another wee friend again. Not good. Fuck, really not good. We got our special move, and I think this guy is special enough for us to use it on him. Oh, so that must be my critical shot, that purple one. Right, okay. Cool. Combat in this is so different. Get the hang of it. Yeah, I feel like it. I'm not great. Like, fuck, I uploaded TikTok the other day and somebody went on to correct me on it. They were like, oh, you know, you could charge that weapon. I was like, yeah, but I kind of got flustered and didn't know what was happening. So there is points of it where you kind of panic a little bit because you are kind of moving, hacking and shooting at the same time and trying to dodge. And I'm not overly talented, so it's more difficult for an old man like me. What is this? What is this? What is this? What's this? No, that doesn't go that way. Right, okay. Right, so we now have that big block out there. Am I supposed to... Ah, do that the whole way down. Right, okay. Wonder if I can get through now. Yeah, the combat is wonderful in this. Kind of keeps you concentrated, which is very good. And you, if you want, you can go lean into the dodges, or you can properly hack. I'm kind of half-arsing everything. I full-arse nothing. What is going on here? Why did I need this? So up there's a wee room. That's probably get across there. Ooh. Nope, door closed. Oh, you tease. You fucking tease. So why is this here just for this? I think I could have done that anyway. Righto. So why you not let me in? Oh, it is now. Fuck, right, okay. It's a tease door. Can't be fully or anything, but it is a bit cheeky. It is a bit cheeky. Rumors. Probably should have read that. Is the true Dr. Hayden brought his daughter's biometric data to the lab? From what I heard, yes, his only daughter Daisy stayed on Earth and he moved back to the moon. Ooh, so is Diane based on that?
Had a daughter.
Daisy.
That name ring a bell?
Oh.
When I got the stop code from 8, I also got some data from her memory. Dr. Higgins made us both to help with his research.
Right, okay. So they are based, right, okay.
PRAGMATA.
I know I'm missing shitloads of stuff, but I can go back later on and get it through. Like, I think there's stuff as well that you kind of have to get upgrades later on. They get them. We shall see. We shall see. Ooh. Sir, you're not authorized to be in here. Can I see your ID? had no ID. Oh, there's another one. I am the law. Riot blaster? Yes, I will take a riot blaster. Well, that's just fine, isn't it?
Missile spotted.
I'm trying. I'm a trying. Oh, there we go. Oh, sure, that's himself away. Yes, maybe it's a the photon thing. I don't like the charge effect on that, even though the other one has a charge rifle. It kind of it's charge and let go. Just like Elsa and Frozen, we just let her go. There is motion at my front door. I'm still waiting on a delivery. It's a bit late. I doubt I'm going to get a delivery this time, but you know what? It is what it is. Ooh. I can hear one of them jobbies. Is he up here? Is that why I can hear him? Where the fuck's he hiding? Maybe I'll see him when I go on up. There's a thing in there. Actually, you know what? I have a scan, don't I? I'm up there. Right, okay.
More containers with panels.
More containers with panels. But we're up against you.
I mean, it's all hacking,
This is our life now.
puzzles and stuff, right?
No.
Everything is going to come out of this room to get me.
It isn't a puzzle. I have to analyze and then substantiate the underlying.
Okay, I get it.
You're not a puzzle. Right, okay. Let's see what... Can I see what's happening here? Wonder if there's a way to reset the room if I fuck it up. Actually, maybe I don't need to. Maybe I can just run and jump. Yeah. Well done, Hugh. She gives an... Oh, she does. She does. But you know what? We joke about it, but she's only having a laugh.
Use that back at the shelter.
We can use that back in the shelter. Ooh, right, so I'm gonna get across here. There you are, you little bastard. Bingo! Got him. Right. Trying to... Right, so that block there has to go across. But how? You're not getting up there with that. Is there a way to reset the route? Wouldn't think so. Oh, but I can come around the arse of it, can't I? Do that. Sneaky wee fella, I know, just hiding up there. But thankfully they have a wee audio key to let you know. Kind of like the way Resident Evil 4 did it. So pop you there. I don't know how I'm getting this one back across, because I've kind of fucked myself with that a wee bit. Well, that's what it is. You, I could probably pop over. Yeah. Everything's locked in place. Yeah, nobody's fucking moving you now, kiddo. So yeah, I could probably make it a go. Could I get across from here? Yeah, there we go. Job's a good one. I just get back up and I can climb across. Sweet. Puzzle unlocked. Ah. Princess Downy, thank you very much for the lurk. Welcome on. How are you getting on? Let me see. Right, climb up here and we get this wee one first. Training data, right? Okay. Cool, cool, cool.
There's a broken cabin here. Maybe that's their training simulation data.
I keep pressing the wrong button there.
Oh, I'm glad we found you.
Should we go back and bump our health up? Nah, we're okay. Oh, we're fucking back outside again. Right, okay.
No more boxes.
No more
Maybe we could
boxes.
use that mining rig to get across.
That thing's supposed to be a mining rig?
Who says it? So, no. Lovely view, though. Wonderful. Wonderful view. Look at that. Look at that for a skybox. Look at that for a skybox. Look, loves a good skybox. Stasis net, don't need another one. Right, okay. I feel like we're going to fight things here. You know what I mean? And the game's alright too. Way. Alert.
Unauthorized access to cradle equipment detected.
Oh, well, that's not good.
Find and eliminate the threat.
I can't believe Edith lugged a bunch of boss over here just to fight.
That's one. Oh, what do you mean more? I should only get the one. It'd be good if I aimed and actually hit the thing. Oh no. Oh no, what? What happened? Didn't even say hello before trying to kill you. I know. So much rude. Blaster, right, okay. Photon laser, we'll just leave you there because I'm assuming more people are going to come down. That's why there's so much ammo. Oh, there's Earth. Look at that. It's kind of cool. It's like your woman out of Final Fantasy VII. Earth. This is fine. I'm sure he's friendly. Leave the shooting to me. Yeah, you look over there, kid. I got your underbelly. Oh, there we go. I like that you actually. I like that you actually moves lower it there. It's a nice detail. Yeah. Oh, fuck. Well, that's interesting. Right, let's should get him. Don't I type move slower? Yeah. No, I know what you mean. There's a lot of love, I think, went onto this game. It's really good. The one sticky bombs are shite. There we go. Stasis net. I do like the stasis net.
That wreck was kind of fun.
Fun? We were almost torn to pieces.
Maybe go back? No, don't. Maybe I don't need to heal. I don't know. Am I getting too overconfident with it? I suppose there's no real punishment for dying in this. You do just kind of come back. Yeah. There's fucking Dickhead McGee only show up here. Look at it. They've stuck this stuff out in the middle of nowhere, tempting me. Tempting me.
So well from here.
Yep.
Oh, good wee moment. Oh,
Always looks
amazing.
so blue.
Down there, every place has its own kind of color.
You know everything about the Earth, don't you?
Trying to pitch in. That
I've
is.
always been into space and stargazing.
That is nice, though.
I've been all over, searching for places with the best views and clearest skies. Went all the way to the Namib Desert once.
Is that unusual?
Maybe a bit adventurous for some. But my parents supported me the whole way. Told me to do what I wanted to do. So I did. And you learn it's not enough to hear or read about a thing. Sometimes you gotta live it.
You? I want to go too.
Go where?
To all the places you've been.
All of them?
Yeah, all of them.
Is that so? Then let's
Yeah, we're going home. I'm still stuck for sticky bombs. Where do you see the sticky bombs being the best weapon in the game and me just ruining it? Right, so there's a few places to go into. They have a door here. There looked like there was a... Let me go in there. There looked like there was a way up over here too. Let's check this one out. Oh, right, okay. Ah, right, okay. I probably wouldn't have seen that. So, that was a bit intense.
Get back to the shelter.
A fucking lovely game. With a bunch of weapons to play with. Yeah, yeah. I think the problem with sticky bombs is I don't really know what to do with them. I think I'm supposed to attach them and then hack them, but I've never been able to get it to work. I think it's just because I'm a bit dumb.
this is a lab. Or at least it was.
Maybe the Luna Digger did this.
The Lunar what? Yeah. My brain does not brain it, unfortunately. I'm like that with a lot of games. It needs to be a bit simple. Like, I play a lot of Street Fighter, and it's more so because I know Ken's moves so much, I can just switch my brain off and just do them.
Very good.
Lazy, what is happening? How are you getting on? All that head, no brain, I know. Turns out your brains are actually held inside your hair follicles, and I am at a massive disadvantage now. Lazy, how are you getting on? I believe that. I have luscious locks. Exactly, and that's why you're so intelligent. Oh. Maybe don't stand on that then. Do not stand on the goop, sir. What? What was this room? Was like a lift or an elevator? I don't know. You friend? Oh no. He's gained powers. Shit. Doing well. Pure naked today. Been a busy week. And the heat, I suppose you're getting it quite bad as well. Mystery Black Loop, I know. Never goes wrong in a movie. Nope. Nope. Well, it worked out well for Spider-Man, didn't it? I can't hack the fucker. Right, how am I going to get through this? Oh, it just slows it all down. Right, okay, you just have to kind of fire your way through it. Well, that's not great. Right, okay. Alright, 36 today. Just not okay. Lazy, congratulations. Happy birthday. Anybody not as well? I'm sorry. The shoutouts on my stream deck aren't working properly, so I have to do it old school. Happy birthday. Well done. I was the same. I had my birthday at the end of July, and I'm 42 now, so I would love to be 36, to be young and to be 36. It'd be amazing.
I'm not so sure.
Impact Fire, I haven't really... Well, I did use that a little bit. Did use it a little bit. You know, for the fact I meant... Oh, temperature. Ah, right, I thought it was your birthday. Well, happy birthday anyway, Lazy. Can't believe you're only 36. If it was the winter, you'd only be 0. Lazy's younger than me. Yes, he's only 36. And he's from Larne as well, so, you know, he's had a tough life. I'll be 28 in less than a week. Ah, so it is coming up anyway. Oh, happy birthday in advance. 28. Oh, to be young and to be 28. I have socks older than you, sir. Pre-Larnians don't age, they just mutate. They mature like cheese. Aren't you 24, lad? Look at these are all young, these are all making me feel ancient.
Should we take a break?
I am 28. Ooh, right, okay. I'm only slightly older, you're still a lot younger than me. As of July 9th. Oh, you're a July baby as well. Look at us. We're all over the place.
We can get into the Nexus Tower from over there.
You're a day older than one of my cousins.
Welcome
Day
to
older's
the
a day
Nexus
older, isn't it?
Tower. Entrance to the tower is strictly
Still in 20s. I know, Hook. I know. Look at them. Look at them. Young bucks. Their whole lives ahead of them.
immediate termination.
Thanks for the warm welcome. I'll see myself in.
Infiltrate the Nexus Tower. You infiltrate the Nexus Tower.
Well, let's just see where we can go.
Jealousy ages you, Granda. I know. Hey, I could be your dad. You don't know. You don't know. I could be your daddy. Something's gonna try and murder me. Yep, that's not good. I'll snap your whimper. Listen here, whimpersnapper. Ah, you tell him, you tell him. These young kids don't even know when they're born. They talk about their difficulties with their Elden Rings, so they weren't there for Turtles on the SNES. Or the NES. That was when real difficulty happened. That's when we had to iron our chest hair. Keep things up. There we go. I might stay up here and pick a lot of these guys off because I don't really want to go down and fight. least buy him dinner first. Don't threaten me with a good time, sir. Good big head guy. I don't like them. They're not good. They're not a good time. But could probably bait him with one of these mines. Could do what exactly?
Now we're ready to zap some bots in place.
Alaska Bell, what is happening? Look, could you give Alaska a wee shout out as well? Loving it. Loving it. That's a wonderful game. The lead character Diane on it, she's phenomenal. Phenomenal. So Alaska plays a lot of Final Fantasy games, a lot of JRPGs, also, but also has a gardening YouTube channel as well, which is quite cool. We were making some gardening jokes earlier on too, you missed them. But how are you getting on? I am just back. This is my first stream back in a long time because not a long time, but it took a wee break from streaming. Yeah, I'm going to hide up here and just take these guys out because I don't fancy going down and fighting them. Garden, it does grow on you. It does. It does. It does. Did I detonate all them already? Fucking dead, didn't I? So do fucking I, because I've just landed down here like a fucking tube. Ooh, maybe a decoy generator. That'll be a good one, won't it? Oof. But yeah, here in the UK and Ireland, we're dealing with a bit of a unusual bout of the heat, which we don't normally get. I suppose there's other folks that are like, well, we get it warm all the time. We envy your ability to withstand the heat. What if I pop the decoy over there? Would they all go to it? Well, that fucker does. You destroyed my decoy? You son of a bitch. You know what? Why don't I just run for it? They can run with us. We got everything you need. Anybody name that cartoon? From the 80s and 90s. Darkness falls, reading shadows in the night. I was over this heat wave, but now it just feels like revenge. It is, and it's what we get because we didn't buy enough Tato. Tato gods have turned on us. That seems like something over there I gotta do. Yeah, we're fine. Like it's not unbearable. It's just uncomfortable. I think we just complain more than anything, really, don't we? I think our main issue is because it's normally so cold and wet here. Our houses are built to keep in heat. We don't have AC at all, so whenever it does get warm, our houses store the heat, and just at night it's fucking awful hot. Poor wee Hook can't even wear his Jimmy Jams. There's no AC there. Oh, that's right. You're up in Alaska. True. Do you get many very warm days, though? Ah, here, look at him. He's doing his thing now, isn't he? and is streaking about the house. Hook, yeah. But he'll be doing that anyway. He does enjoy a good streak. Whether it be on Twitch or in the house. Some of the place actually greenhouse in the summer gets so hot, above 70. Ooh, that is. It is quite warm, and you wouldn't expect it, would you? I always like the idea of living in Canada, where certain places in Canada, your summers are quite hot, and then you get the nice snow in the winter. And they're kind of made. I'm going. Their infrastructure's kind of there. They can deal with it. Quite cool.
Nice having a barrier to keep us safe.
I don't like the barrier. Oh, fuck. Maybe I should like the barrier. Oh, there's two of them. Right, you know what, we're going for the decoy. You just can go play with that guy. I will steal this. And then...
My turn.
Hank, what is happening? It feels like 111 Fahrenheit here today, and because I have that set in streamer bot, that converts to 43.9 degrees Celsius. That is fucking hot. Welcome, Hank. I forgot I have that. Yeah, so I have it that if you type in temperature and put like an F or a C, it will convert it to the other measurement. Just because we do have a lot of American folks and stuff, and... Bane, what's happening? Hello, peoples. I am peoples. Occasionally I am a person. Today, not so much, but welcome, what has happened? You can keep your temperatures to yourself, Tank. No. Tank needs to tell us how hot it is. So we know when we visit him what kind of clothes we should wear. So if it's 49 degrees over there, Hook has to wear his shorty shorts. I don't want to waste that. Actually, I don't know if it will be a waste. I am also people's. Alaska, I can confirm Alaska is people's. It's true. Right, there's going to be more. Oh, fuckaroonie. Right, okay. So Diana, we're going to go for a super hack. I probably shouldn't be going for the big guy first, but I'm just gonna. Let's fuck it. Maybe take out his wee mates, his wee muckers. Where's it, guys? Wait until you get closer to the bayous and the swamp with the human sets on. Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine. That'd be quite fierce. Think you baking or stewing? Both. Both. He's boiling. Yeah, I'd rather not go hide in the cold. Just find a fridge somewhere and live in it. Which actually I kind of used to do when I worked in retail. I used to work at a supermarket, and when I was quite hungover, I'd come in and just stand in one of the big walk-in freezers. It was wonderful. It was my favorite. Did I walk around and rub everybody's chicken on me? Maybe. Can neither confirm or deny. I don't have to be silly. Be a silly thing to do. It's in the crisp 85 today. Ooh. I love the walk-up freezer, my old job. Left me alone. The cup butter in a nice cold room. Nice one. And did anyone crack up and think, how dare he? And was it actual butter, or was it the margarine that Hook claims is butter? And it isn't really, because it's 28 million ingredients. And the first one is oil. And you did got him. And then I got him. Actual butter, high-end place. Ooh, lovely jubbly. You know, I love hotel butter. I don't know why it tastes different, but see that wee bit of butter that you get with your toast in the morning? Oh, delicious. Ah, sure, there's himself away. Yeah, it was a hotel. Fancy. Ooh, nice one. Pure lemon. Rid of the lemon.
We're getting good at this.
Container masters coming through.
So that will help me get across there. Right, okay. Hated the place though, aside from the freezer. You hated the place, but the freezer was cool. Sorry. See myself out. Introduce my family to an imported Kerrygold and never turn back. Oh, Kerrygold. Oh, it's a top tier butter right there. I'm a golden cow man myself though. If I can have a bit of golden cow, I'm happy, but Kerrygold. Nothing beats it. A bit of hot toast and just really, really nice, cool, really, really nice real butter. I read a book when I was a kid. I know, shock, I can read. And it was called Hot Toast Oozing with Butter, and it was about a frog who kept making toast, and everybody kept eating his toast on him, and oh my god, I still salivate thinking about it. There's a puzzle over there. I think I might just leave it. I think I might just leave it. Because I do want to come back at 100% a lot of this stuff.
Edis's control terminal's got to be up ahead, right?
Right, I definitely need to heal this time though. Yes, return to the shelter, we get that done. I kept acting stupid to know the manager, and the head of year told me genuinely sad to let me go. Acted sad for 5 minutes and watch YouTube for 6 hours a day in school. Oh my god. I did work experience for a programming company, and they just had me do data entry.
You okay?
Yes, are you?
Thank Edis for the warm welcome.
Oh, she's got a tent. Look at that. I think there is a couple more things I need for this part. Gained 1 cabin.
Read Earth Memory Series complete. Replicating related objects.
Oh, we finished this one. Right, okay. Oh, that's amazing.
Play, nap, and play some more. Camping is so much fun.
Oh, nice. I like making my grilled cheese with it and reserved cake. Oh, tomato subject. Oh my god. Bane, that sounds amazing. Oh my god, she's in the tent. We're going to play. We're going to play. Let's get out stuff, I know. Oh, hide and seek again, right? I have to find her. And she's not hiding there. That's where she was last time. Where is she hiding? Don't call, I'll find you. Okay, where the fuck is she hiding? Is she here somewhere? Ah, there you are, gotcha. This game is so... Oh, it is. Like, this NPC, Diane, is the greatest character. And this is our wee kind of hub area, and you kind of build it up with all her stuff and memories.
You never know when a kitty could just pop out of nowhere. So I should carry a net, so I can catch one next time.
Who's Annette? Why we're carrying her?
You better think twice before swinging.
That was an intense search, yes. Lucky we only have one of them, though, otherwise it'd be too tense.
Grab them with my hands.
Cats don't take kindly to being cornered. You gotta earn their trust. Only then can you be their friend. So just be patient and see if they'll come around on their own.
Okay, I'll try.
I've never played a game where I've enjoyed the dialogue as much as this one. I really want to fully level up my gun. As much as I enjoy the other weapons, the main gun seems to be my... Oh, a mod slot. Hack engage, overdrive, repair up thrusters. I don't know what mod slot. The main gun is kind of my favorite. I've been leveling that up. Unfortunately, I have to go because I'm trying hamburger buns from scratch, and the yeast butter. Oh, amazing! Thank you very much, Beam. Come on. Pop the pictures in the Discord, sure. Let us see them when they're done. Good luck and have a good night. Popping some more mods. What we got? What we got? What we got? Hack. Maybe an attack mod. Or hack. No, a couple packet support. Direct hits from enemies no longer reset the hacking matrix. Ooh, that one's pretty good. Attack power for close quarters. Attack power from behind. Nah. You're slow down where weapon damage. Oh yes, I like that. Okay. Do I have any more nodes? Node joke. Power access point. Oh, no, I meant yes. I meant yes, not no. Sorry, I got distracted by the eldest making a wee pile of noise in the kitchen. Ah, fair play. Were they cooking you anything nice? I always get hungry at this time of night. It's... Sometimes for me, I think it's boredom. I think if I'm bored or... I'm an emotional eater, so if I'm feeling a bit down or something, I'll look the packet food.
Is this the right way?
Looks like the only way is down.
But the only way is down. But that's why I'm finding it handy with the app and stuff for the fasting, because it kind of forces me to... It's like a video game. It's trying to beat my score. Oh. And here we fucker. There he is. Bingo. No, he's cooking for himself. I'm an emotional eating too. I like the greys at night. Yeah, you get like that. And I've now got to the stage where I'm just like, no, just get a drink of water. Or a cup of tea or something. But then again, a cup of tea without toast or a biscuit seems like a wasted opportunity. No, I left the sticky bombs. Me hate sticky bombs. Oh, right, is this big worm guy? He's wrecked the place. Well, bad snake. I even go up there after him. Probably not. How are we getting? I've been lurking and catching up with Reacher. Oh, Reacher's a wonderful show. Alan Richardson's a great actor. I enjoy his interviews and stuff too. He's just really seems genuine.
It's like a
Hey,
junkyard.
I'm going easy on the treats. Ate an entire tub of Ben and Jerry's to clear room in the freezer. Well, it was necessary. It was... Can't be wasting food. There's starving kids in Africa. I think that's probably part of the reason why I'm the size I am, because it was told never waste food because there's starving children, and now you just clear your plate because out of guilt. Oh, you son of a gun. Needs to be done. True, yeah. Can't have Ben and Jerry sitting going all soft on you. That doesn't sound right. Oh. Is this the same hole I was in before? That also didn't sound right. Exactly. Ayo. Seems like there's more of them worm things, just they're just dead. Makes no sense. Need that on a t-shirt. Yeah. I'll get one printed up, no bother. I'm not gonna get stopped in the street. This rifle's kind of tearing through boys now at the moment. Got upgrade components. Here we are, all the lads. Fuck! I wasted ammo on that. Sure be grand. So you're working on landscaping? Yep. Working on landscape.
Phew! Something's glowing.
What is glowing? Up there? No. Right, it's just the residue, it's all over the place, right? Okay.
So this is Luna.
This is Luna.
The ore you use to make Luna filament, right?
Yeah. First time seeing it in person, though.
And I've got Luna filament inside me too, right?
They say it can do anything, so sure. I guess it's possible.
Can
Was it
I
like her
do
blood?
anything too?
Maybe not anything, but I'd say you're doing good enough.
I'm doing good.
Fuck! Jesus Flemish. Women's got some glowing reviews. Yep, definitely.
At Backlash?
Backlash. At Backlash.
At Backlash.
At Backlash.
Sierra, thank you very much for the
Backlash.
sub. Welcome on 12 months as well. My god, a full year.
At Backlash.
Really didn't
At
seem that long at all.
Backlash.
What is
At
crack lacking?
Backlash.
How did your stream go as well?
About time. So,
Backlash.
if we could get past that armor, we could do
More
some
importantly.
serious damage.
Do it, lady.
Do it, lady. It's grand playing Final Fantasy VII Remake. I love Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm going to stream Rebirth after I get through the Resident Evils because it's a long old game. But Rebirth is one I want for the VODs as well.
Mrs. Mainframe's close.
All right.
You played Remake before though, haven't you? I'm better, 13 months. Yeah, look at this showing off. Thank you very much for the sub, Flemish. Showing off one more month. What I could do is I could ban him for a month so Sierra could catch up. Yeah, but where's your watch streak? These are the important questions. This is a boss arena here. What are these? I better drop them on the fucker. Find out. We'll find out. 6. Yeah, I played Remake before.
Up there.
Well played.
We made it.
Oh shit, it's getting serious, I know. But Sierra will always win the fight, so it's grand.
Unregistered guests, this is your final warning. Continued presence in this area may result in physical harm and/or death.
Well, could you let me out?
Withdraw immediately.
I'm calling it. You'd make a lousy friend. Wormed our way out.
Wormed our way out. Oh, well done, Hugh. We're still finding time for a little pop.
Where'd you go?
Where did you go, Cotton Eye Joe?
Our old friend, Mr. Worm.
Can't run away this time.
Nothing pointless. Just coming for us. Time to bury this retreat.
Oh, you son of a gun. Oh, so I can just skid up it, right, okay. How'd I get that? Right, okay.
Oh, it's only just now wide open. Shoot it. Overdrive mode. On them. Leave it to me.
Let's go down, let's get him. No worming his way to this one. That's not very much. Yeah, he's gonna blast me with that laser, isn't he? Oh, right, okay, that'll knock him down. Fucking dead. Ooh, nicely done. No, it's only a third off his health. I'm still not doing great, but I'm doing better than I was before. We'll pick up some weapons. Detachable fucking what? Oh, fuck, right. Right, okay. Dan, I am trying. Well, that worked. Fuck, I didn't mean that. Alright, we need more weapons here. Oh, it's slowly coming after me. No, 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 no. Right, okay, let's go. Oh, he's going down, is he? No. Where is he? He tried to land on my face. Whew. Fierce now. Racking the puss. Fuck! Shit. Shit. Come on, you get out of the way. Get out of the way. Get up. Where are these wee bots so I can fucking whop them? Now, come on. Where are you? Where are you? Fuck. They're everywhere. I have to learn to hack these fuckers. I can attack it. What? Mouth is wide open. You should have. We're getting close. We're getting close. I'm going to take out the last little bit of health. Just. Oh, fuck. I really need that last wee bit of health. Shit. Okie dokie. Okie dokie. Almost there. Oh, is this undone? Is this undone? It could be, unless it crushes me. I don't think there's a boss beating without being by the skin of my teeth. Yeah, it does. Maybe there's some sort of difficulty scaler or something on it that it makes it a bit tighter, depending on how well you're playing. But yeah, I've kind of been the same. There's a couple of them I've died to and had to go back to as well. But they're good. They're really good boss fights. GG.
Tell me what you want.
Oh, now,
Oh, excuse
the
me?
lighting isn't great in the room, so you can't really see her as well.
What do you say? No. No.
Hmm.
I'm not going to give you a treat if you call me that. What do you say?
Please. 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 Bitch, please.
Theo, would you like a treat, darling? Eh? Where's the baby? Here. Oh. Here. Firebolt's coconuts. You can't really see her. The lighting isn't great on her at all. See about changing it. Maybe get her only spotlight or something. She is the star of the stream. There we go. Not even dentist sticks tonight. It's like wee bacon twizzlers and she fucking loves them. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to quickly take a break now that I beat that boss. I will be back in a wee minute. She's in stealth mode. She is. She's stealthy. But enjoy the wee game. Actually, I don't even test that to see if it's going to be working since the updates. But we'll find. We'll see. We'll find out. We'll give myself a drink and I'll be back. Look, that sounds like a you problem that you need to go pee. Why am I so purple? Am I supposed to be so purple? Sammy Dabby Doo, welcome in. What is happening? Thank you very much for coming in. Signed in. Actually, I haven't even been checking. I know lots of people have signed in, but I haven't even checked to see how far these are towards the boss. Good wee chunk, good wee chunk. There we go. Sammy, what's happening? Didn't you struggle with Super Mario World? Hook did. Hook rage quit because of Super Mario World. Mr. Worldwide is very purple. I am very purple. I do like the colour purple. So yeah, we're playing a wee bit of PRAGMATA. I just took a wee break there. Refilled my juice. And we'll get stuck back at it. We just beat a boss. Sammy, how are you getting on? I've actually caught a couple. PRAGMATA is honest. Nah, there's fucking flops and everything that catch you doing it.
Mainframe, here we come.
Mainframe, here we come. Took struggle with the kids game. He did a wee bit. It was funny though. Decoy generator. I prefer the decoy to the impact barrier if I'm completely honest. I'm alright, sleep deprived. It was at work, man. Nice Halo. Halo's around. Reboot Edis. Ooh, this does not look good. Why can't I jump? I should be able to jump, but I can't.
What's with these bodies?
Is it the one we found to get the help in the game and with the game and increase the phone bill by a lot? He did. He wrecked it. And then he claimed his uncle worked for Nintendo, and he was playing Super Mario World 7 as well. He's not even at his desk. He'll be giving away all his secrets. He'll be finished on Sunday. Final mission's been rough though. I know, especially on that difficulty, man. Mommy maybe move everything out. Devastated. She's like, no phone for you. You can do your chores. I did. When I was a child, several times. But do you have infinite rocket launchers? Is that how you beat it? Building secret levels. Bullshit, do it on stream or we don't believe you.
Stick my boot up your holographic ass.
Subject has declined to evacuate. Anti-personnel measures.
That was Mario 64. So you've already lied. Oh my god. Oh my god. Lovely. I think I'm making for Sunday. My weekend being sequestered from me with all the volunteers in events. I don't give a damn about. To be fair, you were married. So it's last time they move out. Yeah, it got weird then at that point. See, that's a secret. Use all 100 hours in it. Yeah, you got a game for Christmas, and that was you for a year, unless you swapped it with somebody else. Never played it. So you gonna? Sarah's playing Remake now at the moment, doesn't need to. I could run fast. I know, that was wonderful. I think there's a clip of that where you finally figured out how to run. Okay. This can't be the end of it.
That was incredible.
This end game, because I may need to leave. It shouldn't be. Oh, we're rebooting Edis, you say?
Initiating command code E9900. Administrative privileges to 8 restored. Resuming
We're part of all
transfer
2D Marios.
Essential port. Thank you for your cooperation.
Mario made a good transition to 3D. Sonic, I don't think, really did. you remember Sonic 3D? Oh, it was horrible. Who's this?
What are you doing here?
Oh, it's 8. She's alive. Liked it until Sonic Frontiers, was I actually enjoyed. Oh, no, apparently Sonic Adventure was quite good. I never played it, though it was Dreamcast. Frontiers I have, but I've never really got into. All Sonic 3D video game. Yeah, I was the same. I played it, but it was slow as fuck. Off I go to about spoilers. Sammy, not a problem. Thank you for coming in, chatting. Oh! Fuck. 8 must die. Fuck.
Hugh Williams, you've completely ruined her.
What the fuck? We tried to save this brat.
You tricked us?
I don't like this.
I truly needed your assistance. But I must complete my objective.
It's Edis. Keeping her trapped.
Spread dead filament across the earth. No. Why? I thought you'd understand.
Minus Mario Kart, yeah. Mario Odyssey's very good. Yeah, he was a PlayStation and Sega boy. Or an Xbox then. I was the same. A lot of the earlier ones I never had, but I played over my mate's house. Like a lot of the OG Nintendo games was playing at somebody else's house. Oh, we're both fucked now. She missing an arm and everything.
Why?
And a leg. She only one leg.
Let's head back.
If it was the other side, I'd say she'd be alright now.
We need to regroup.
You become, but never had any more games. Sega kid. Yep. It was the same. Sega, PlayStation, Xbox. And Nintendo when I got a bit older. My first Nintendo console was a Wii.
Alert.
Respect. As long as you had Streets of Rage, I know.
From DI-03367.
A 3-pack with Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, and Revenge of the Shinobi. Oof. Solid. Was heal? No. Fuck. Right, okay.
Guidance mode activated.
Right, okay.
Please proceed to the special tram right over there.
Special tram? Where's that?
Oh, I wondered what this... Queen V, what's happening? Welcome. Good to see you. Yeah, it's been a while. I caught your stream. I haven't been streaming in a minute. So, to be fair, this is my first one back. But thank you very much for coming on. How have you been? Right, tram. Drive the car. It's Friday here. Hope you're... Oh, no, it's not Friday here. We've another hour 45 minutes before it's Friday. You're in the future. What's the future like? Is it good? Is everything fixed? Has the price of fuel gone back down? Tell us what the future holds for us, Queen V. I play this game. It's on my Christmas list for Santa. It's cold. It's cold? Goodness.
I like this. Hang on, kiddo.
Yep, it's going back up. Fuck's sake. Fuck's sake. But is the third part of Final Fantasy VII, Revelation, is it any good? Is it as good as we're all hoping? Ooh, what's this? Save Diana.
Maybe that machine over there. Alright.
We're gonna go kill dead things to save this child.
Why would she do this? We're supposed to be the same, but I don't understand her at all.
Hey, don't worry about that.
Oh. What about all the fucking corruption stuff that she has on her? How are we fixing that?
What now?
Insert reactor?
How many times I gotta go through this?
Am I all better?
Not yet. Gotta get that junk out of you and get you back on your feet. Wait here.
I'm coming with you.
You can't. Not like that. You need to rest.
You? I'm going.
Determined, you?
Okay. Let's move.
Now let's go get you that reactor.
Ooh, music kicking in. I like that. What's all this? So get energy reactor. And she still hack shit? Impact barrier, rather a decoy gen if I'm honest. I'm already fully repaired. Why is it giving me so much health?
Diana, stay with me.
I'm here.
You know, you could have stayed behind.
You're okay without me?
No, it's just... Don't overdo it, all right?
Yeah, take it easy, kid. Oh, I don't want them backfires. Just decoy gen will do me. Oh, you can go away to fuck, sir. So there's corrupted nodes now whenever you're hacking. Right, okay. Where are those sticky bombs? Fuck that shit. Whoa, ninja guy. Oh, that's a new slowdown. Well, not the new slowdown, but you know what I mean. There we go. Got him.
I think this black stuff is talking.
Don't worry. We'll get you fixed next.
Maybe take away the charge here, sir. Because I already have rocket launchers, so that'll do, that'll do, that'll do.
No way around
Gonna fly? Yeah.
We just gotta push through.
No, we gotta fly over the top of you. Touching dead filament interferes with Dan's hacking ability.
Diana? This is my turn.
Take that. Right. Where were we?
Hey, down there. Is that a reactor?
Looks like it.
I don't know, but if I set up a whole pile of YouTube videos where I talk about it, am I a reactor? Hmm?
Take this!
Booyah.
It is done.
Ooh,
Work
okay.
on the PRAGMATA prototype is now complete. It will be be a fine replacement for Daisy in the clinical trials ahead.
Projector's broken.
Hey, if that was you, then that was Dr. Higgins.
Yeah.
Oh, you can park there, mate. Oh. Right. Where am I going? Oh, some shit's gonna pop out of me now. It's dark. What did Daisy have?
Purpose. The doctor spent years researching rare diseases.
Is it all coming back to you?
Yeah.
Oh, we need to start singing Celine Dion song. It's all coming back to me now. That's where I need to go, but just in case there's some sort of collectible or we doohickey I can pick up. Apparently not. Just go here. Right, okay. Okay.
I was created to help the doctor save Daisy, but I failed in my purpose.
What do you mean?
I wasn't good enough.
Hmm. I know it's horrible, isn't it? Her wee voice. I need to stop getting hot. I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing. I know, poor wee thing. Jesus, they really know how to make you feel the feels, don't you, in this? There we go, we got him. Yeah, that's it. Oh, they do, they do. Everything from Death Stranding to The Last of Us, they know what they're doing. Oh fuck, right, okay. Let's get him in the head. This is interrupting my hacking, you know. One of the worst ones for me can be a game called I Am Alive. You gotta get back to your family from some kind of apocalypse and save a little girl named Mai. I've never played that. Sounds good though. Here we go. Right. I want to play Death Stranding 2. I don't know if it's a game. I don't know if it's going to be a game I'll stream, but I want to play Death Stranding 2. The first one, all the endings kind of annoyed me, but the actual game itself was amazing. Great game. Some fun mechanics like holding up a gun to stop survivors attacking you, but you've no ammo, so you gotta melee them and listen. Oh, right, okay. Let's have a wee look out for that one. Sounds good. Quick generator, already got one of them.
You okay back there?
I need to see if I can find a healing point. This is not a healing point. Let's go with this. Right, let's go. I got a chance to look it up on YouTube. Oh, I will do. It sounds good. Give it a wee look, see. No, I don't think. He's on half health. I don't think I need to use my special ability on him. Well, then again, I could probably die. Yeah, I think I got it. I think I got it. I think I'll be okay. Very noir apocalypse feel. Cool climbing system. So, oh right, okay, very nice. Sorry, Dan, I'm trying to avoid it, but there was collectibles inside it, so you must suffer from my collectibles.
Got the cash to build this place. They could at least spare an extra reactor.
Oh, they don't look fun. That's the one thing, you can't avoid combat in this.
Pretty gutsy looking bots for a PRAGMATA lab, don't you think?
I think these were made to fight.
More security. Great.
If you need to contact the rooms, so don't request. Honestly, I might go watch it for nostalgia. Ah, fair play.
All the doctor ever talked about was these.
Happy days.
Oh.
Ooh. What?
I'm sorry. I can't spend it with you once you're better. I'm done. No more research. I'm coming home. We're so close. Just hang on. A little longer.
So they were living apart.
He had to be here on the moon for his research.
All that work.
Okay, I know. All the good intentions.
Yeah.
But sure isn't that how it all starts?
Another incompatibility. Another failure. The results are always the same.
Very good intentions, but then cautious with the rest. Yep. Look what happened in Jurassic Park.
Forget about 7.
Our Dennis Nedry suffered.
Another way.
All he wanted to do was steal their technology and sell it on to the highest bidder.
Incompatibility.
Yeah.
Oh, this must be the Wayne's bed. Or the... one of the wee androids. He's very misunderstood. He was? Ah, and this is the other one. So one of them must be 8 and one of them must be Diane. Of course, I'm urgent. We received word your daughter's condition suddenly worsened. Oh, no way! We're not 10. Right, okay. Oh, the controller's fucking up again. I think it's disconnecting through Bluetooth. I don't know why though. The weird one. Okay.
So this is where we part ways. Yeah. You may forget who I am, but I will always remember you. Hey.
So she's 7. Right, okay.
Someday.
Very cool. And there was more? Even the music's getting all glitchy now. Where'd I go? I'm assuming over here, but how did I get up there? Must be like a panel. Actually, what will happen to the others? Yeah, unless they show up now, they fight me or something. I don't know.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. I'm lucky, right? It has been. How did I get up? Ah, the roof. You sneaky little bastard. That's where you hit it. Also, if this is a research facility, why are they so sneaky with hiding things? Hmm? What did they cover the effect of AI architecture capable of producing facial expressions? He was just talking about the development of the AIs, right? Okay. AI. She's just letting off little sparks and stuff as well. Waffles! I just let it share and had to go back as Leox on screen if it's so dirty again. Yeah.
Hey, Diana, here we go.
My horrendous face has that effect on people. I apologize, sir. I apologize. Just turn off the screen, it'll be fine. What's happening, Waffles? How are you getting on, sir? Howdy, Waffles. Anybody not following our buddy Rare Waffles as well? Lovely, lovely man. Very, very handsome man. Last playing Fallout 4, you were doing a lot of challenge runs and stuff. So definitely give that man a follow. There we go, got him. Fucking great seeing your head back on screens. And thank you, I appreciate that. Oh fuck, it's one of them fuckers, right, okay. Oh, he got me. He got me. He got me. She doesn't seem strong enough to help anymore. She's very, very weak, and her hacking abilities have slowed down considerably. But you know what, she's still the best. Lasery bastard. Just me and you now, kid. Your soul is mine. Too flippin' warm. It is toasty, sir. It is. We were supposed to get thunderstorms earlier today, and it never happened. And it would have been nice for it to break the heat a bit.
We're gonna get you better.
And what's worse, it doesn't even sunny. It's just like really cloudy and warm. And I think it won't be the same tomorrow if the heat isn't broke.
Come on, stay with me. Got the reactor. Now it's your turn.
We're Wayne. Right. Any robot fuckers can fuck away off.
Yes. It's finally a positive result. This could be the key to saving Daisy. All thanks to you, 8. We must proceed carefully, but with your help, we'll get there. I guess I will have to pull the plug on 7.
I'm close to some kind of original rain dance of this, I guess, tomorrow. Be fine, just put a few ice cubes in your tea, you'll be fine.
Yes. It's finally a positive result. This could be the key to saving Daisy.
Oh.
All thanks to you.
Is this why it turned? Because she was being used? Naked thunderstorm. Yeah, we were supposed to get one today, but maybe it'll be tomorrow. It'll happen. We had one in the evening there. We had none. We video it and put it on Discord. Yeah, because we fucking need it over here. Insert reactor. Reactor. Insert it. Let's go. Oh, this is all our games so far. Pretty sure I called for preparation if it had. Yep. You could do a cork rain dance. Or what you say is, you go outside and say, oh, I hope it stays nice and dry the day so I can get that grass cut, and then it'll start raining.
Are these your memories?
I was useless. I'm useless.
No. Diana, stop.
Whoa! The Brucifer effect, thank you very much for the raid. Welcome on. The Brucey's pack has arrived. Sausage Dog Stampede and make away. Thank you very much. Who? Wild Paul, I'm assuming this is your doing. Thank you very much for the raid. Welcome on, folks. If you don't know me, my name's Leork, and I'm a Northern Irish streamer. I've taken a wee break from streaming, and this is kind of my first one back, so thank you very much for choosing me for your raid. Welcome on. I hope you had a good stream. What were you playing? No, I'm not a human. Never played that. It sounds very horrorish, though, isn't it? Yep, all my fault. Wild Paul, thank you so much. Any about raids in the week goes into my Hall of Fame as well. This is we had Mochi-san raid in earlier on, and she there right beside her, up beside in the red. Thank you so much. I didn't stream at all in August, so these are the first ones, so I appreciate you. Thank you very much for coming on. We played an indie game. You played an indie game, right? Okay. It's my bestest mod. And I guess fucking sound. I played before. It was creepy but good fun. I played one the other night. Oh, here, where do we chat? I played one the other night. Boba Tea Cafe, I think. Oh, it was fucking scared the shit out of me. It was fucking freaky. Really good game though. Really good. It's a very short game, but you just run a boba shop and there's just so much creepy stuff happening around you. It's good. Good. We're playing through about a Pragmata. If you need to raid and run, definitely do so. If you want to hang about, you're more than welcome to as well. We're just playing the most adorable dad simulator in the world, but also a great action game too. I've been feeling badly in Helldivers 2. Steam Train, what time do you call this? Thank you, sir. Welcome. Excuse me. Where the fuck have you been? I was taking a break from streaming. I put it up on the Discord and everything. Been feeling badly in Helldivers 2 on a call at the same time. Helldivers 2 is a phenomenal game. It's great. Look at that wee tiny blitzball just pattering about there. I love Helldivers 2, but not playing ages. I was the same. I was all over it at the very start, and then I've just kind of not fallen away from it, but there was a group of us that was playing, and we just haven't played it since. You're weeks late. I was hours. It's, well, you know, Steam Train, you're correct in what you're saying. You're accurate. Oh, Batman. Oh, fuck, what is this shit? Yeah, we got distracted by shiny new things. That's always the best way, though, isn't it? Same way I keep buying new games and not having time to play them.
Not now.
Oh, this looks up a badass. Wait, we didn't even get to fight a normal version of this. And now we have no Diana. Shit. This is not going well. He did not fall for my thing. Sir, that's not fair. Fell right into my stasis net, you son of a bitch. He's like Zone of the Enders, remember that game? Which is the best type of correct Futurama reference. I like it. So many games, not enough time. Started streaming, though, and actually complete game. This is the same with me. It's completing the backlog. Streaming does that for me, where I play a game through now to finish it, so I have the VOD and the whole collection of it. At the cadet level 2. I don't know what that means, but that sounds cool. I'm proud of you. Oh, she's gonna hack, she's gonna hack. Let's go. Deletion protocol? That's a new one. It's like chat as your accountability. Yeah, it makes you finish games, and it's good because there's a lot of games I would never have finished. Like Days Gone. Streaming pushed me to finish that, and that was a phenomenal game. I'm not making any sense. I'm not making any sense either. It's grand. It's fine. It's almost the weekend. It's weekend eve. But I do find that with streaming a game where I would get distracted by something shiny and move on to something else, but if I'm streaming it, I feel like I have to continue and finish the story in it. We can play it if you have it. I would say NA would have it. NA looks like a Helldivers 2 kind of person.
I must say, not sure if you got a fix or an upgrade.
Did I do good?
Yeah. You did great.
Hey, Hugh. When that black stuff got on me, I just felt so sad.
I've seen loads of people play it. Oh, it's very good.
Sad, huh? Like you picked up on her feelings or something through all that gunk?
What if Faith feels like that all the time? But what she's doing, that's wrong.
Yeah, I think so too. Let's go stop her.
Oh, what's wrong with you now? Oh, he's infected with something?
Yeah. We're out of here.
Hey, come on. Let her know. She could probably unhack it. So Diana's override ability has now been upgraded to deletion protocol. When activated, it opens nearby enemies, temporarily disables their movement and deals heavy damage. It also cleanses dead filament. Ooh, that's kind of cool. I wonder if I get that more frequently then.
Let's head back to the shelter to regroup.
That was a really cool mech though. Really cool mech. So does that mean...
I can get rid of it now.
Oh, amazing. She can get rid of the red stuff. There's nothing up that way.
I'll get rid of it.
Oh, very cool. That one's a bit different as well. It's not even like just holding it down. It's... You just have to kind of aim it, which is kind of good.
Alright, back to the shelter.
Right.
Oh, I thought my controller was fucking up again. Fix up Diana. We've got her sorted. She's back. She's upgraded. She's ready to go. What is wrong with me, though?
A new destination has been added to the tram line. The central port is now accessible.
This must have been where the doctor got out.
We gotta stop 8 and get back to her.
For effect, thank you very much for the follow. I appreciate it, thank you. I'm going to drop you a back as well and see about catching up with your streams.
Shelter level upgraded. Central terminals now loaded with shiny new stuff.
You've brought a new effect to our horror show. Why AI are you describing as a horror show? How dare you?
I think 8's at the central port.
So with this game, there's loads of little collectibles. I have to go back and get these ones in the second area, but they kind of fill out little rooms for Diana, and they're kind of cool and cute. So I shut down the Windows updates means troubleshooting tomorrow. Oh, no way. I had that way StreamerBot and OBS whenever I logged back in. I had to set up a lot of updates. I'll upgrade my boosters, and yeah, keep going with the boosters. Let's go. Thanks for the stream. Good to see you. Got to head to bed now as I'm shattered. I'm going to wrap up now anyway as well. Because I'm working in the morning. And it's kind of a good spot because we've kind of cleared an area and beat up a few bosses. So it's a good way to kind of end the stream. But I didn't know what way it was going to go tonight, but the recent stream didn't break anything. No, it didn't break anything. It switched a few things off on me, which was odd, but it didn't break anything, which was nice. But thank you folks for coming on. I had a lot of fun tonight, and I'm really glad that I streamed because I really appreciate you. Thank you everybody for the subs and for the bits and for the raids as well. These are very, very good to me. Really enjoyed the game. Definitely like this. I think you've enjoyed it. It's quite good. Quite good. Once you get your head around the kind of hacking mechanics of it, I think it's just a great story. But we're going to see about raid now tonight. And we'll see who we have in our list. We have Ian, we have Reddy, and we have Mike. Does audio are all still streaming at the moment? Let's see. Now, those are the ones I had on work there. Let me have a look. Where are we looking? Oh, for fuck's sake, Flamash. Why are you doing that to me? Why are you doing that to me? You know what? I haven't raided Reddy in a long time. I'm going to raid Reddy Crash because he's a really good buddy and lovely, lovely fella. If he's going to hang about for the raid, we much appreciate it. Thank you for the stream, Queen Bee. No problem. Thank you for coming in. So we're going to raid Reddy Crash. Oh my god, I nearly jumped out of my skin. I know, it's horrible. There used to be a jump scare where I just screamed. I think that one's worse because there's a window right beside me and it just sounds like there's somebody there. So we're going to raid Reddy. I'm going to pop a wee raid message in. Top one is for followers, bottom one is for subs. Cheers to the stream. Also, I like Flamash getting blamed for that now.
Have you heard of the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV? With an expanded free trial, which you can play through the entirety of A Realm Reborn and the award-winning Heaven's Ward. Stormblood and Shadowbringers expansions up to level 80 for free with no restrictions on playtime.
Yeah. Flamash is just raging it wasn't him. So let's see. Let's just beat the boss.
But daddy is a state of mind, you know what I'm saying?
Raid message.
Daddy.
Raid message. We're going to raid out to Reddy Crash. And hopefully I'll be back on Saturday. I'll put it up in the Discord anyway if I more than likely will be. But I'll chat to you then anyway and let you know. But thank you again, folks, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.